Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast that today is all about the Akashic records. And I am so excited we have an expert here so that I don't have to try and maybe fail to explain them again. So welcome to the show, Anne Marie. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, Caroline. I'm super excited, and I know that you didn't botch it up. You delivered exactly what you needed to deliver.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Little ego boost. But before we dive into, what even are the Akashic records, I'd love to just have you introduce yourself a little bit more, share about your story, as in depth as you want to go. I would love to know if you kind of grew up with a spiritual background and then how you came to find the Akashic records yourself.
Thank you, Caroline, for that question. That's a very complex question. I guess I'll just start off with that question that I grew up in a spiritual household. And I would have to say that answer is no. I grew up more in a religious household than a spiritual household. And the whole concept of Catholicism was so foreign to me, even as a child. I started doing novenas on my knees with my grandmother at the age of 3. And I thought that I was being punished for having to do that. But really, I think that that was a process of training me into a much bigger practice of being and working with the divine than I could even understand at that stage in my life. So, coming from a very religious family, it just felt very foreign to me. And when I graduated from high school, went into college, I went from a Catholic high school to a Baptist university, and I was felt even more lost in that world because now these people really knew the Bible, they really knew the stories, and it just went over my head. So I didn't actually start looking into spirituality until around my mid 20s. I had what I would call an awakening type of an experience. And that's when I really started searching more for answers. First, it started off with eating natural foods, utilizing natural products. And then it started going further where I started to discover more about sacred geometry. And it wasn't until I was 29 that I happened to go by this store here in Austin known as the Herb Bar. And that's all they did. They sold herbs, teas, oils, all kinds of really cool stuff. And I happened to go to the Herb Bar one day, and lo and behold, they had this flyer for the Akashic Records. They were going to do an Akashic Records seminar. I was so excited that I immediately contacted 3 of my girlfriends, and I was like, we got to go. I don't know why, but we got to go. So I attended the Akashic Records training, and I'd already heard of the Akashic Records because I had read this book called The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life. And this is a book that discusses aspects of the Akashic Records and how the Akashic Records influences different areas of creation. So I attended this workshop, and I don't really remember anything coming out of this workshop except for a desire to get a reading. So I got my very, very first reading. And the reading was really powerful because I was going through a really challenging time in my marriage. It was just falling apart. That's the kindest way I can say it was falling apart. And so when I asked this question in the Akashic Records, why was this happening? What did I need to learn from it? The story that I received from the Akashic Records about the past life agreement that I had with my spouse then mirrored and verbatim mirrored a story that he had heard from his parents. Him and his parents had gone to see a shaman who was about 15 years old. This shaman accessed some past lives about their relationships and revealed to them that they were a family in Bali at one point in time. And while they were this family in Bali, the father was a chief. Their son was going to be in that position that was going to get that next role, but he didn't want to. So he secretly built a ship and stowed away with his friends, and they disappeared one day, leaving behind his family, a wife, children, all that juicy stuff. And
Wow.
so he heard that at 15. I heard this at 29, where we were the same age. So I'm hearing the same exact story almost 15 years later, and they're like the parts of the puzzle that just fit. And what I realized was, oh my God, we're not dynamically fit. We were never dynamically fit. We didn't fit back then. We don't fit now. And there's a reason why the record keepers are literally letting me know I have to move forward in order to find peace and happiness in my life. That's when I signed up to work and learn how to use the Akashic records. And as soon as I got certified in reading the Akashic records, I remember offering, it must have been 10 or 15 free readings. And I was so ambitious that I was like, I'm going to get all these readings done in a month. And it literally made me sick. I got so sick that I couldn't finish the readings. And I eventually got all the readings in, but I realized that how I was going to practice in the Akashic records was going to be very different than maybe how I learned or how other people learned. So I actually did the opposite. I started my practice in 2009. And then in between 2009 and 2015, I started like 5 or 7 other businesses.
What?
Somehow I just did not believe, I know it sounds crazy, right? I started 5 to 7 other businesses and they all flopped, they all failed. And I would keep going into readings with other people to ask, why was this happening? And it really came to the realization of the record keepers were just like, until you realize that this is what you came here to do, you're going to keep trying all these other businesses and they're going to keep failing because this is really what you came here to do. And this is what you're here to succeed in. So in 2015, I said, all right, guys, I'm about to throw in the towel with entrepreneurship, period. However, I'm going to give you 1 year. I was really ballsy. I was like, who am I to tell the record keepers, I'm going to give you guys a year? So I did. I told them, I'm going to give you guys a year. And if you can prove to me I can be absolutely sustainable in this, we're going to do this for real. So what happened was in 2013, 14, 15, I was already doing the work. But in 2016, it was actually more lucrative for me to work as an Akashic record reader than operate as a nurse in the hospital. And they couldn't afford me. That's the way I looked at it. They couldn't afford me. They couldn't pay me enough. And really, what was I doing? I no longer enjoyed the work in the hospital. I had clients. I was starting to feel the squeeze. So in 2016, I actually retired from my career as a nurse, and doing the Akashic Records work is what I do full time now. I finally believed in the guides and what they told me. And since then, I've actually only started one new business and closed that business down because I realized that's not what I'm here to do. This is the work I'm here to do. So that's a bit of a long story.
No, that was like so perfect. Thank you for sharing all those details, because I think it's beautiful to point out that you had these parallels, or you and your previous partner had these parallels in different times of your life, and how that presented. I think that just points to the power of the Akashic records that we're going to get into. But then also, I really appreciate your vulnerability with sharing some successes and failures along the way, because I think we all do that. We'll like start a thing, or maybe we don't have full belief in ourselves. So then we're like, well, on the back burner, I'm going to try these 6 other things too, because I think I'll fail at the one thing I really want to do, like that. And that's like a form of self-sabotage, right?
Isn't it? Way. Oh, I was so good at it.
Yeah, we all have that. And I think some parts of our shadow, if you will. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, the thing is, Caroline, I was so scared of the work that I wanted to do the most. And now that I'm doing the work, there's nothing else I'd want to do. There's nothing else I'd even want to think about creating, because this is so fun. I often tell my students that this is spiritual play, not work.
Yes. And I just want to repeat that, what you said, like I was scared to do the work that I wanted to do, because I think that is a nearly perfect parallel within fitness and nutrition. Like I can speak from my own journey over the past year. I was most scared to believe that I could give up tracking macros if that's what I wanted, and eat intuitively and just totally trust my body. Like that's what I wanted, but I was so scared. It took a lot of up and down for the first, 9 months until I felt like I was finally getting the hang of it. So perfect parallel there.
Thank you.
Very wise words. I love that. And so before we get too far ahead of ourselves, can you please give us a brief explanation of what even are the Akashic records?
Oh, absolutely. And what's really fascinating is that we are actually surrounded by this field of energy that's known as the Akasha. And I truly believe that Source created the Akashic Records as a data bank and a library to know itself. Because each and every human being that has an Akashic record is innately tied to a divine experience and awareness of what am I here to learn about myself, this life, and other people. And so when you're done with this incarnation, you get to sit with your guides, and it's as if you plug in your, let's just call it your USB card into the main data bank of Source, and you download all of your experiences. That's how we would see it. But what's happening is the Akashic Records is always recording. So in the field of the Akasha that surrounds us, we're always recording every thought, energy, sensation, feeling, opportunity in the records as a way of tracking our own evolution. So the Akashic records are an actual plane. It's a dimensional place. Some people call it in the 11th dimension. Other people call it in the 5th dimension or higher. And what I find about the Akashic records is it's not as if it's in one dimension and not in others. It's in all levels and dimensions of being. Now, it's an actual place and a space and an energetic place that you access through a very special prayer that will start to give you information that comes from the library. And what's really interesting is that the Akashic records, it's so vast that when you're able to access the Akashic records, what you're able to access is also based on your timeline. So the timeline that you're in accesses the information that are mostly available for you. So if you're asking questions like, when will I die and how will I die? Well, in that current timeline that you're asking those questions, that information may not be available because that's still not set in stone in the Akashic records. So the Akashic records as a data bank is always collecting information, and it's holding the potentials for every decision and choice that we make. So let's say when you make any kind of decision, there's an array of all these potential decisions that you could choose from. And in the Akashic records, all those potential choices play out to a point and then they dissipate. So it goes to show as a soul, if I choose this, what are all the potential outcomes that can happen? So what I find really amazing about the Akashic records is that because it's this energy that contains all this information, many people on earth in their present form are living out agreements, contracts, and patterns that they made with other souls in other times. And this is the lifetime that it gets a chance to get played out. So it's not exactly a location that you go to. Like, let's say I'm going to go to Los Angeles, when you're in Los Angeles. When you say I'm going to go into the Akashic records, it's more of an energetic feeling and a vibrational shift, like an expansion, rather than saying I actually am in that place. I see the boundaries, I see the details, because how the Akashic records appears for each and every person is very different and unique.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I think that's really helpful. So it's not, I like that analogy with LA. It's not like you're in that very specific 3D, I'm touching it world, but much more energetic. You have to let your mind expand a little bit to start to, I think, grasp what that is.
Exactly.
And you mentioned saying a special prayer, and obviously you have a lot of practice with accessing Akashic records of certain people that you work with. So how does that process work? Like, how are you connecting? Like, you can keep this very kind of brief, surface level, if you will, but like, how do you access, and it's only per one specific person at a time? Is that right?
Well, that's really interesting, Caroline, because I do access the Akashic records in different ways. I access it as an individual person's records. When I work with couples, I'm accessing the 3 records, so individual records as well as the shared record that these 2 people have. I'm also accessing the Akashic records in the form of a community. So in the group that I run on Facebook, the Akashic Collective, we do a once a month community call, and I'll bring in anywhere between 4 to 5 readers, and we stack opening 10 Akashic records all at once.
Oh, wow.
And as we're opening all these Akashic records, they're clicking into place. And then when we get on the live call, we're answering one question per person per record at a time. So before we get to the second question, we actually close that first record. So when you ask this question around accessing the Akashic records, there's a few different ways that some people can access the Akashic records, because it's a location that has multiple entrance points. There's not just one way to get to Los Angeles. There's more than one way to get into the Akashic records. Different people have created different prayers, and different prayers have different variability of clarity and even details in the Akashic records. I've been doing this for over 14 years, and every year I get an Akashic record reading from somebody I don't know. I know that sounds really weird. I train students, so why wouldn't I get readings from them? Well, I actually get readings from other Akashic records readers I've never met, because I like to see how they do it. And what I find is that everybody reads differently, everybody receives differently, and it's not like a one size fits all, which is one of the reasons why when you ask, how do you access the records? Some people can access it in the form of meditation. Some people go into a theta state. They're able to access that. Some people have, sometimes they go into plant medicine and they go into this trance-like energy, and they're able to access the field of the Akasha, which can help them access some of the information. Now, what I find is that the process is extremely sacred. So preparation before opening is as important as the actual opening of the Akashic records. And I've created a protocol for myself for accessing the Akashic records through time and experience that makes me able to really rely on what I'm getting and make it be that routine way I open it. So there's always a protection prayer that I state, calling in the 7 directions, and then I'll do the Akashic records opening prayer, and then when we're done, I do a closing prayer, and then I actually close the entire space to really release myself and that other person I'm working with from that field of being in the Akashic records. Okay. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful. So it's I was just kind of trying to get at your method a little bit, because we've talked meditation on this podcast, we've talked plant medicine, so it's kind of cool to hear about like your specific recipe and how everyone kind of has their own recipe to access what they want.
In the classes that I teach, the one thing that I really repeat over and over and over and over is the protocols for how to open the Akashic records. And sometimes people will say, do I have to do all these steps? Do I need to say the protection prayers? Is it necessary? And my question is very simple, my response back, which is, would you drive without your seatbelt? That's my answer. If you're not willing to drive without your seatbelt, then it takes you less than 10 minutes to do the preparation so that you as the receiver and the reader can really honor the clarity that you've created and the space you've created to receive. So I created these protocols. Other practitioners and readers have different ways of how they access the Akashic records. And what I've found through testing through sessions after year is that it works. And when I follow the protocol, it works. I relax. I have a great time. I don't have a headache. I'm not drained. I'm not tired. I don't get psychic attacks.
Okay. Yeah, that's just goes so much to, or it says so much about our attention spans today. I feel like you want to connect with this 11th dimension of your soul council, but you won't put in 10 minutes to kind of do it properly and really ground down and just be in the moment. You're like, can I just soul council? Like, where are you?
Exactly. People want that same innate response when they ask themselves, like, should I buy this? Yes or no? And they want an immediate response right away. But that's not always the way the record keepers function. And even the way they communicate often makes people have to wait. But the most beautiful aspect of the Akashic records is it's all based on free will. Your right to choose, your ability to discern. Nothing is set in stone for you. So you have this amazing ability to really impact your life, multiple stages of your life, and recognize you don't have anyone else to blame but yourself.
Yeah. Nothing's set in stone. You still have the power to make choices that are going to decide your direction and your outcomes.
Big time.
Yeah. And so, getting into kind of the information that can be presented during a reading, one thing I definitely want to ask you about is past lives and karmic relationships, or kind of solving that karma that we might carry. I know I had a lot of past life come up, like experiences from Earth and not Earth, I should say. So, can you kind of explain like how past lives can influence us, how karma might be showing up in our life today from those instances as well?
Well, that's a really fascinating question. And we'll talk about, I'll answer the karmic question second. A lot of people are really fascinated with past lives and the Akashic records because there's a part of them that wants to know, what am I here to do?
Mm-hmm.
Who am I here to do with it? And who do it with? And how can I really do it better? Now, when past lives are brought in, it gives people an awareness of, oh, that's why I attracted that relationship. Oh, that's why I chose my family. Oh, that's why I chose that job. Oh, that's why I have that particular pattern in my life, whether it's self sabotage, addiction, anxiety, stress, whatever that pattern is, that's why it exists because I've done it before. So, on that level of karmic energy, I've done it before. That's when you as a soul gets to go, oh, if I've done this before, then everyone around me, everything around me has been with me in this energy before. So, how can we shift the outcome? If something is like a very dissonant kind of energy, there's a pretty good chance there was a dissonant energy that existed before in a previous life. And it's as if the previous life gives you the opportunity to pick up where you left off, continue the track, and upgrade so that when you come back, you can pick up where you left off, pick up again, keep going, upgrade. So, really, by having that awareness of past lives, you really save yourself time.
Mm-hmm.
If you find out, oh my gosh, one of my past lives is literally letting me know this dynamic doesn't work. So either I can continue to fight against it and try to force the dynamic to work, or I can realize that if it didn't work now and it hasn't worked before, there's a good likelihood that it might not work again. So you choose the higher path for yourself. And once you choose the higher path for yourself, that's when you start to remove yourself from the karmic wheel. Because part of our purpose here on this plane is we're in a three-dimensional world, but yet we live concurrently with other dimensions. So we live concurrently with the fourth dimension, the fifth dimension, even the 11th dimensional plane of the Akashic records. And by having that awareness of living concurrently with other dimensions, you can remove yourself from the karmic wheel of the third dimension of Earth and say, every decision I make from this point on is really for my highest and best good. I'm making my decisions with my eyes wide open because I know my previous past lives caused me to experience ... The moment you do that, you remove yourself from the karmic wheel because now you're operating from a 5D mentality of union and alignment with source. So the decisions you make for yourself are really intended to align to your highest and best good. The moment you do that, that's when you start to neutralize some of the lessons on the Akashic records. That's when you start to realize, oh, I don't have to go through that pain again. I don't have to go through that challenge again. I don't have to feed that energy. And that's when you start to live what I call your dream life. And that is something that everyone can absolutely reach. You can live your dream life. You can experience heaven on earth by having enough information and data that influences how you as a soul chooses to act each and every day. That when you speak kindly to yourself, you speak kindly to others, and you choose the highest and best action for anything and everything you do, you start to live in this place where you're not influenced so much by the push and pull, the judgments, the games that people play on the 3D level. You just exist. You live. You're actually in a state of joy.
Oh, that is such a beautiful interpretation. Yeah. And one of my clients that I work one on one with, that's one of her main goals when we started working together, is she called it her queen energy, which I just love. But she's like, when you're like a queen and you're regal and people do stuff around you, but it doesn't affect you, you just kind of like float on by. And I'm like, yes, I love that. So that's what made me, that's what I thought of when you were describing that, of living with heaven on earth, living in your joy, consciously making those choices that are going to take you where you want to go.
That's when the record keepers are saying to people, you are 100% living in your authority, which is as a queen, you're in domain of yourself and your field. You're living in 100% authority and authenticity with you, your path, and your role. And when you achieve that, then it's sort of like, okay, things are going to happen in life still, but you can handle it. And nothing's going to shake you from that center of, I've arrived, I'm here, I'm living my dream life, and I'm just going to enjoy it.
Oh, I love that. That is what everyone wants, isn't it?
Yeah, and people can have that. That's the
Yeah.
thing, is you can permit yourself to have that, but just like the energy of self-sabotage, some people are still working with the old past life pattern of not good enough, not worthy, not accepting of themselves. So they go through this push and pull karmic relationship of, I want it, but do I deserve it? Can I have it? I really want it. So what happens is the record keepers are just saying, choose one. Choose. Do you want it or not? Yes. If it's a yes, then stand firm in the yes. Hold that yes, contain the yes, expand the yes. Let that yes be every aspect of your being, and it will arrive in the time that it's supposed to. Not always your time, not even their time. It's really in alignment with spirit's time. So, yeah, I always tell people, please make that decision. Choose yourself. Nobody else is going to do it for you.
Yes.
You're worth it.
And holding it. I think that's a really important point you made, because it's easy to say, yes, I want that today. And yes, I'll do whatever it takes today. But what about tomorrow?
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
what about when shit hits the fan tomorrow?
Oh,
Are you still
yeah.
going to choose yourself?
Yeah. The thing is, the Akashic records are neutral. They do not have an agenda. Their job is just to collect data. You can access that data that then influences how are you going to live you and your life in a way that maximizes the time you have. And that's the thing. Time is really precious. So it's within our best interest as individuals as well as the collective to really choose our highest and best path. Give ourselves permission to be happy, to contain it, to have it. And even if there are some days where it doesn't always show up, you're operating in the awareness that it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Yes.
not in
That
a
belief.
deficit.
It's that deep
Yeah,
belief. Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah. And I definitely want to leave time for our live channeling. But right before we get there, I know we've talked kind of about 5D, 11D. Obviously, we know 3D. Could you give an overview of like what these dimensions kind of mean on our Earth level?
That's a good question. So what those dimensions mean on our earth level is that there's an aspect of human beings that feel like they have this a bit of a distorted relationship with time. And what's really interesting is that because these different dimensional realities exist, that also accesses time in terms of past, present, and future. So when we have the awareness that we're concurrently living time all at once at the same time, so you're on time with time every time, you're in perfect time. Even if you feel like, oh, that was bad timing, guess what? It was still the right time. So when we look at these different dimensional layers, what we're looking at is the energy of stacking. You're here in this three-dimensional body, in this three-dimensional world, but at the same time that you're in this three-dimensional body, in this three-dimensional world, you also inhabit a fourth-dimensional space, a fifth-dimensional container, a sixth-dimensional energy, a seventh-dimensional. So when you look at a human being, think of them as having all these different layers, that all the dimensions exist all at once. So when I'm accessing the Akashic records in the 11th dimension, I'm doing it in my three-dimensional body while my spirit is energetically locked into the fifth dimensional plane. And what happens is when you're in awareness of this alignment, then you're not separate from source. You're really maximizing your existence. You are making wise use of time. And in a way, I almost find that having access to all these other dimensions is a distraction.
Yeah.
It really is a distraction. There were people that I met in my travels early on that wanted to live in the fifth dimension so bad. They wanted to live in the space of unconditional love and they just wanted to exist there. But they have a three-dimensional body. They're dealing with three-dimensional money. they're dealing with a three-dimensional job, and they're dealing with three-dimensional shelter. So I find that to be a really interesting energy, because when you're here on earth, your job is to be here on earth. You're here to really get good at acknowledging how to live in the three dimensions, so that you can let yourself expand energetically, let your spirit expand energy, so you can exist in these other dimensional realities and not feel like you're just overwhelmed, overextended, and then you can't keep anything together. What I find is a lot of people that I've met in my journeys when I was younger who really wanted to live in the fifth dimension were just actually practicing avoidance.
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with my three-dimensional stuff, so I'm going to just live in an unconditional world.
With
But
unicorns and
with
yeah.
unicorns. Oh, but I need a ride to town. So can you give me a ride in your three-dimensional car? And can I have some of your three-dimensional chips? Because I'm feeling a three-dimensional hunger.
Yeah.
So to me, I'm like, so you just want to live in the fifth dimension, don't want to work, but you want to feed off other people. You just sound like you're being a three-dimensional leech to me.
Yeah.
So
I guess
yeah.
my take on it is kind of to practicing mindfulness, whatever that means to you, practicing your
Yeah.
connection with the universe, with God, with source energy, and then coming back to your 3D body and remembering that connection.
Yeah, exactly. That's the role right there, remembering the connection, because that's what the access to the records gives us, is the opportunity to remember and then do the work on the 3D plane, because that's where we're at.
Yes.
Now, because 3, 4, 5D and all those dimensions also exist, you can maximize that awareness of inhabiting, holding, and living in all those dimensional energies, that you feel this zen, you feel this peace, you feel this aspect of, I'm doing it all. And I'm handling it all. But in the three-dimensional form, I'm really rocking it. I'm paying my bills, showing up, doing relationships, doing all this stuff, while knowing that my fifth dimensional aspect can make the decisions on the 3D plane that doesn't incur karma. Yes. I hope that makes sense.
Totally. I love that. Yeah, thank you for explaining, because I think there's all kinds of like 5D stuff out there these days, and I'm like, this is getting crazy, but yeah, I think that was a good, important overview. And so like we talked about before we hit record, I was so excited that you agreed to do a little bit of live channeling on the podcast, and we talked about, connecting to the Earth's Akashic records, bringing messages for the collective, right? So it's not just about me. You're not accessing my Akashic records. We're going with more of a broader approach, right?
Yes. And it can be a very, very big energy when you're accessing such a large body like Mother Earth. When I started doing my training, I actually accessed the Akashic records of the Amazon forest. Something in me was like, I want to do what I can to help. I've been an activist since I was in high school, and I was like, I want to do what I can to help the planet. And so I opened the Akashic records and quickly passed out. Not going to do that today, Caroline. Okay. But I quickly passed out when I opened the Amazon forest, because it was such a huge energy. It was so big that I couldn't hold it. So it took training and time for me to be able to keep holding bigger bodies, and bigger bodies. And so opening the Akashic records of the earth is as easy as opening up, say, your Akashic records or my Akashic records, because it's taken that energy to keep expanding bigger and bigger to hold it.
Very cool.
So we're excited to play. I'm excited to play.
Yeah. So we'll take out any editing time for you to pause and connect and do what you need to do. So go ahead, do that now, and come back when you're ready.
Okay, so I'm just going to take a quick moment, Caroline. I'm just going to mute you, turn off my video. I'm just going to open the Akashic records. I'll probably just take about a minute and a half to 2, and then I'll come back, and then we can start working together in the Akashic records.
Yay.
All right, thanks. I'll be right back. Okay, Caroline. Great. So the Akashic records for Mother Earth is fully open, and I just want to ask you how you would like to start. There are 3 very short messages that I received in terms of general information, but I'm going to let you decide how you would like to start and continue our call.
Yes, that is great. I would love to start with any...
Wait, okay, go ahead again.
That's great. Yeah, I would love to start with any general information messages that are available, and then maybe we can go into a couple questions as well.
Great. Okay, I'm going to step aside, let the record keepers come through, and let us go ahead and begin. Before we begin, we would like to welcome you into the Hall of Records. We are extremely pleased in capital letters that you are here at the opening of your Akashic records, especially in accessing the records of the earth. We have three key messages that we would like to reveal and relay at this time. Number one, self-care is not to be ignored at this time. The amount of self-care that one does for themselves is actually an act of self-love that one does for the earth. And we see that there are many people right now that are in a state of selfishness that often look at self-care as a way to be able to hold over others. This is not what we mean by self-care. We are talking about eating right, thinking right, feeling right, and even taking the responsibility to take right course of actions. Our second message is, please be present with time and your place on earth. Each and every individual human being has their own unique relationship with time, and time is one of the most precious commodities that you have. By being mindful and aware of how you are utilizing time properly, you have the opportunity to really expand this resource, dwell in the present moment, and most of all, take advantage of the actions, the thoughts, and even the feelings that you are expressing in that time. Our third message is to please recognize and don't believe that just because you have, quote, grown up, end quote, that you're no longer a child within. And we encourage you to nourish and nurture your relationship and aspect of this inner child, because this is the aspect of you that is still in wonder, not jaded or cynical or tuned into the opinions of others. This is the aspect of yourself still in its purest form. And we ask you to tend and cultivate your relationship to this being within. We await your questions at this time.
Thank you. If people are maybe feeling like they are stuck in a rut or struggling with taking that next step, maybe it's scary, maybe it's a little unknown, maybe it requires vulnerability, what are some ways they can cultivate more trust in themselves at this time to take another step towards healing?
Thank you for your question. There are three answers we would like to deliver around this question around how can people cultivate more ways to trust themselves in order to head towards this healing. Number one, we see that this is actually the greatest gift that one can give oneself when you choose to trust yourself. The reason why we see this as a gift is that when you give yourself this energy of trust, then you are acknowledging that the decisions and actions that you make for yourself are for your highest and good and not detrimental in nature. Therefore, don't look outside of yourself. Start to foster that inner trust within by acknowledging the decisions that you make each and every day. Number two, we see that the second way to increase the energy of trust is to create accountability in your life where it is missing. If there's an aspect of the self that is looking to improve, then having an accountable partner, a friend, a therapist, someone that you are respectful of and feel responsible towards pushing yourself will get you through the uncomfortable decision making process. What we find is that human beings will often push themselves harder for others than they will for themselves at times. Number three, we see that people fear the transformation that can come when they make a decision and trust themselves. However, what we are hearing is the words, quote, it's about cultivating the habit to trust yourself in the decisions you make, which gives you an opportunity to tune in and listen more to your instincts and your gut, as well as what your heart wants. We often see that people don't always take into account their heart, and they often see the world through their eyes, which can have a misleading outcome. Yet when you look at the world through your heart and you make decisions from the area of your heart, then you can really trust that you are choosing the highest and best for you. We await your questions at this time.
That is beautiful advice. And another question would be, in this time of a lot of divide on Earth, especially in the United States, are there actions that people can take to start working towards more unity, more peace in the collective?
Thank you for your question. We are very glad you asked this question because we do see the dissonance, and this division is causing people to not tune into the truth. And we see that what's interesting is the word truth is really what's causing the energy of division. As you ask this question, there are three answers that are appearing when you ask, how can people take more actions towards peace and unity? The first is choose which side you feed. If you are a soul who desires to live in peace and unity, then we ask you to align to that kind of conversation and speak that, live that, carry that vibration for you in all you are doing and all that you are seeking and speaking. That means if you are in a conversation in which your opinions are being judged, you are being blamed, you are being criticized, we are seeing the words, if you choose to fight that energy, you are feeding the fight. However, if you simply let people own and have their own opinions, then you are actually disconnecting from the energy of divisiveness by choosing to say what you think for you is right for you, even if it's not right for me. You are acknowledging that people can have their own opinions, and you are also acknowledging you can have your own opinions. Number two, in order to reach more unity and peace, you have to tend and cultivate that vibration of unity and peace in your own home, in your own relationships, and also in all that you do in the world. You are being asked to live in alignment with what you write, create, speak, or think. If you just find that there are people who are against what you stand up for, it is your opportunity and choice to enact your boundaries. And boundaries are really necessary because we see that boundaries help to contain the energy of what you are building and cultivating, which is unity and peace. Number three, we see the words, in order for you to manifest it, you must live it, and you must also be willing to share it. There are freedom fighters in the world right now who are trying to bring a greater sense of unity and harmony in the world, but they are often shot down either because they don't make enough sense or they are against a popular belief. Sometimes in order to hold the energy of unity and peace, you have to be willing to stand up for the rights of others and those that are disenfranchised, disempowered, displaced, because we want to reinforce there's enough in the world for all to have plus extra. We await your questions at this time.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for that advice. If there are any other messages or symbols you would like to provide, now would be a great time. Otherwise, we can close this record.
Thank you for your question. We are very glad you asked this open-ended question because we have three key messages when you ask about messages, symbols, or advice. Number one, we would like to encourage everyone who is either hearing this or getting a chance to listen to it later to look at the symbol of the yin yang. This is exactly what human beings are experiencing when they are here on Earth. The polarity between light and dark, the polarity between the have versus have not. And we want to reinforce that when you look at the energy of the yin yang, it is not static, but in motion. It is in motion, it is spinning, it is moving. And by allowing yourself to acknowledge the light and dark in you, you come into the place of the unified field, the unified form of source. Number two, we see that mantras, mantras, are necessary because they help to send the image, the vibration, the statement that one can choose to live by. And if there is a mantra, we ask every human being to live by. It's I am happy, comma, healthy, comma, supported, comma, loved and whole, WHOLE. This is a statement that brings one's 3D form into its multidimensional forms, and you are really living in a place of unity and peace. When you repeat to yourself as well as to others, I'm happy, healthy, loved, supported, and whole, you are giving yourself permission to have that, and you are holding that space for others around you to also have that. Our third last message is this: be kind. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to each other. The world you have is such a beautiful, creative, and magical container for growth. There is so much potential that can happen on this plane. Don't waste it living in a state of division or dissent when it does not serve you, but only encourages you to enact more karma, to experience division and dissent. If you want this change to occur, be part of that change. Be someone who is kind. Be someone who is unflinchingly willing to show and express love, because you know at your core who you really are, which is a divine being having a spiritual experience in a human form. Other than that, we want to reinforce that if you are here on earth now, you are luckier than you have ever been in previous past lives. You have advantages, resources, and opportunities available for you, regardless of which gender you choose or are, which is why we want to reinforce, don't waste your time on this plane. End quote.
Thank you so much for that advice and those words.
You're welcome. Any other questions showing up for you, Caroline?
Not at this time. Do you need time to close the records?
I'll close those records when we're done.
Okay.
So we're just in a kind of a standing place. We're just kind of holding and waiting. So it's
Okay.
kind of blank. So they're
Okay.
just really saying, if you have anything else you want to add or bring, they're here to support you.
I just want to say, I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate those messages that you are bringing to everyone. I think those are words that everyone really does need to hear. So hopefully this podcast is shared a bunch. Your messages are shared, your experience is shared, and the wisdom of those higher powers can be shared as well.
They want to relay one thing,
Oh,
which
yes.
has to do with this time frame with the pandemic, which is
Okay.
dealing with the coronavirus, which is even dealing with the schism back and forth around vaccination. And they're letting us know that this is going to pass. It's important for people on earth to know that this situation is going to pass. You've lived through worse pandemics in previous lives. You've gone through much harder plagues, and the same amount of division, dissent that you're experiencing now, you've done this before. So this is actually an invitation for the collective to choose a different outcome when it comes to their relationship with plagues and diseases. This is actually a very critical and pivotal time on earth for people to realize that the upgrade and the invitation is here for them to recognize that their relationship with plagues and diseases can take a turn where they don't have to keep coming back and experiencing it again. And again, they want to reinforce this too will pass.
I think that is a message that everyone is very excited to hear and receive. Thank you for that reminder.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. And before we sign off today, I would love for you to share how people can learn more. I know you offer a variety of services. You have a great Facebook group. So, how can people connect with you more?
Woo, what a great question. Well, I am fostering, tending, and growing this awesome Facebook group called the Akashic Collective. We do community readings once a month. We promote other readers. It's a real, what I call is a very inclusive playground. And it's fun. This is a playful place. If you want to be able to work with me, you can find me at bodyenergyconnection.com. I am booked out for this year, 2021. I'll be releasing my schedule for 2022 in October. The only types of sessions I have available are the 911 calls, which surprisingly are as impactful and therapeutic as a regular session. If anything, I think more magic really comes out in the 911 calls because I just feel like we don't have any time or BS to spare. We go right to the nitty gritty, get to the heart of it. I do teach and train students to become Akashic record guides and practitioners. This was something the record keepers repeated for years and years until I finally realized they were saying it out loud for me to also hear, that I needed to do my part to support and train. And I run a yearly program called Become an Akashic Records Guide, and it's really a transformational experience. The kind of confidence that I see these readers coming out with is so not like the kind of confidence I had when I first started, which is probably why I started 5 or 6 businesses before I finally went, okay, we got the confidence, we got it down, let's really do this.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, I highly recommend everyone listening, book a reading with Anne Marie. Mine was, I think I cried like 4 times. It was so, it was intense, but in the best way. So highly recommend connecting with her. And thank you so much for being here, Anne Marie. Thank you for your gifts, those messages. Thank you for providing so much that everyone listening here can just really receive and sit with and hopefully take that next step towards their highest self.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. This was actually really super duper fun. I had a really great time and opening the Akashic Records for the Earth and just having those messages come through so quickly just makes me realize that as a planet and as a collective, we're actually doing good.
We are doing good.
We're doing good, you guys. We haven't blown up the planet yet. So give yourself a pat on the back if you're here. Give yourself a pat on the back if you're really enjoying your life. And give yourself a pat on the back if you're maximizing, taking those big, brave, making decisions, doing that one thing for yourself each and every day. You are really rocking your part and your place in the world. So thank you.
Yes, what a great note to end on. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you next week. Do you feel energized and refreshed now? I hope this episode gave you a little boost to get out there and start manifesting your fittest, healthiest life. If you loved it, please help me out by writing a review and sharing this episode to your story. And seriously, just thank you so much for being here. For daily updates of what I've got going on and to connect further, be sure to follow me on Instagram and head over to ccowellness.com to learn more about my one-on-one coaching and find additional resources there, including my Goddess's Guide to Macros ebook, plus a few freebies. And remember, you are strong, you are capable of achieving anything you desire, and you are worthy of all your wildest dreams.